The Bride.
The Bride!
It's the number one movie on people's lips in America in the film space, it seems. Not so much the box office. It slid into number 3. It might be a record setter. $90 million reported budget, $65 million reported for the marketing alone, and it brought in 7.3 domestic and just over 13 globally. So Maggie Gyllenhaal's sideways retelling of The Bride of Frankenstein was an experiment. I think it's safe to say that it's one that's failed, and it was not unnecessary, but I think handled in a completely unnecessary fashion. I went back and I rewatched The Bride of Frankenstein from 1935 this afternoon, and everything that Maggie Gyllenhaal wanted to say in her terrible movie was said with grace, finesse, and subtlety, and more impact in this movie from almost 100 years ago. She wasted everybody's time and possibly torpedoed her own career for a message that didn't need to be shared. So tonight we're going to get into it because I don't think we're going to have a lot of disagreement on this panel regarding The Bride.
Hold on. Are you saying that Warner Brothers is not going to give Maggie another Gyllenhaal pass?
You son of a... Unless her next feature is making a Ronnie Reed biopic.
That would be great.
The Jake Gyllenhaal character in universe in this film, who's like a talkie era singing sensation, the best part of the movie. Every time he showed up on screen in one of his little bits of the fake movies he was doing, I was like, can we just stop all this other walking corpse nonsense and focus on him? Because that was a stroke of brilliance. And I have a hard time believing that she came up with that idea, but maybe it's like 1 out of 99 ain't bad. I want to say before we get into it, I am going to introduce the panel, but unfortunately I got to give out this disclaimer. We are taking questions, comments, and super chats, but only respectful and or relevant comments will be read on the show. If you're dropping in to troll, insult, or post nonsense, don't waste your time because we're not going to waste ours. That nasty business out of the way. I would like to say that I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have David Fowley of Keeping It Real and Jeff York of The Establishing Shot and Pipeline Artists. Gentlemen, welcome. I'm excited to talk about this movie. I've been kind of rambling, so I'm going to let someone else give the synopsis. I designate Jeff.
All right. Well, it was a simple premise on paper, but boy, was it more complex when you actually saw what it was. Inexplicably, it starts with not Jessie Buckley, the acclaimed soon-to-be Oscar winner probably this weekend, Jessie Buckley, as Ida, the gun moll who is going to eventually be thrown down the stairs and become a dead corpse that they can resurrect to turn into Frankenstein's bride. But nope, let's start the movie off with her as Mary Shelley, talking directly to camera and bitching and moaning about how she was misinterpreted and she didn't get to author what she really wanted to. And it's so overdone and so irritating. I started to cringe as soon as it started. But anyway, we then cut to this story of the bride, who starts out as this woman named Ida, and she's bad-mouthing this gang boss in Chicago in the 30s named Lupino. Get it, Ida? Lupino. A little Easter egg nod to the first female director who sort of had a name for herself in Hollywood. It's so many Easter eggs, you'd think it was Easter, but I'm not sure this is a mashup of Halloween and Easter. But anyway, certainly no holiday. Anyway, she is thrown down the stairs in a very actually tense, sort of well-done scene. Very much like Death Becomes Her, another nod. And buried, and then along comes Christian Bale, who plays Frank, who is the 100-year-old monster created by Dr. Frankenstein. He's now gone into the modern, or the 30s, from his century of the mid 19th century. And he looks up a doctor named Euphronius, who is a scientist who has been interested in revitalizing tissue and sort of studying what keeps the body alive and stuff like that. She's played by Annette Bening, and basically turns her into his Dr. Frankenstein to bring this corpse of Ida back to become his bride. And he wants it to be a corpse because that's where he started from, and he's been lonely for all these 100 years because of his scars and his oozing wounds and his malformed head and his nose that looks worse than Rocky Marciano's. like he's been in a couple of boxing matches, but he wants a bride, just like in the original story, or at least the sequel, of somebody who's sort of brought in the same way to life as he was. And from there, hijinks ensue. It quickly becomes sort of these two on the lam, with all kinds of cops chasing him all over the country, sort of a Bonnie and Clyde redo, if you will. But that's the essence of the story. And along the way, Jessie Buckley, the bride, and Frank, as he's called here, actually do develop feelings for each other and become a couple. So that's the core essence of the plot, I think.
Yeah, that's a great kind of 1,000-foot view of the story. We'll get into more specifics. I do want to mention, because I don't think I mentioned at the top of the show, we are talking spoilers, so be warned. We saw this movie, and that puts us in a very special class, apparently, because as we mentioned, this wasn't exactly a box office smash over the weekend. I do want to talk about the opening of the film, because there were title cards, and once again, this is another film that I think suffers from title carditis. It's beginning to be a big red flag whenever we see those, because for some reason folks have forgotten that there's an art to writing a proper opening title card. This movie begins with two lies. One is that Mary Shelley was prevented from writing the novel that she really wanted to write. There is no indication that that's the case. Right. She did face prejudice and sexism and all sorts of obstacles when she was not so much writing the book, but trying to publish it. Right. She initially published under, anonymously, and people thought it was her husband, Percy Shelley, who was writing the book. There was, concern because it was so kind of graphic and dark and, I guess unladylike or something. But, the Bride of Frankenstein shows up as a concept inside the novel Frankenstein, right. But for various plot reasons is dispatched before it even really gets off the ground or off the table, as it were. The second lie is that she wrote the novel on a dare. Wasn't a dare. It was a game, because and I'd forgotten this detail, but as the 1935 Bride of Frankenstein opens, it opens with Mary and Percy Shelley and their friend Lord Byron, who they, summered with and vacationed with. They're hanging around this luxurious house, as they often did. And it was, you can't tell that it's summertime, but if you know the history, it was summertime, and it was horribly rainy that season. So they spent a lot of time indoors, bored because they couldn't really go outside. So what did they do? They amused themselves by making up stories. And they had this, one day there was this contest, like, hey, who among us can write the most messed up story out of the bunch? And that's where Frankenstein comes from. It wasn't a dare. It almost implies like, oh, it's just, I dare you to write, woman, I dare you to write something that could stand up to that of a man. No, none of that. So again, and this is where the 35 version really outclasses this movie in all different respects, because there is just this respect, this camaraderie in that living room of like, Mary, you blew our socks off with that novel you wrote, and it's soon to be published. Do you have any other stories in this universe? And she was like, yeah, actually, I was thinking about what if there was a female version of the monster, and it might go something like this. So it wasn't dismissive. It was very respectful and very cool. And I think the one flaw of the movie, and I'll just call it a flaw of the time, because I don't know that the concept of the wraparound had been as defined as it is today, but that's sort of the framing device of the movie, but it never goes back to that living room at the end, which would have been fun. But I mean, by the time the film ends, it's so kind of spectacular that it's only after you turn it off or walk away like, oh, whatever happened to those three from the beginning? But yeah, and
you find yourself wanting more Elsa Lancaster in it, because she's playing Mary Shelley as well as the bride. And they're very separate, different performances, and yet they're both brilliant.
They are. And that's, again, that's sort of the same idea we're playing with here, where Jessie Buckley is playing both Ida and Mary Shelley. And I don't necessarily mind the concept of Mary Shelley being in sort of a limbo state. It's hard to tell if she's in hell or limbo or something. She's just in this kind of a dark void, yelling at the camera for some reason about how she's been wronged. So at the end of the film, I don't know what we're supposed to take from that, because we don't see if telling this awful story did anything to improve her case. Like, oh, now she can move on to the proper afterlife now that she's expunged her mind of this story. But it also opens up too many questions about what we're about to see. makes it sound like the story we're about to see is the story that she was not able to tell. So my question is, Mary Shelley died in the 1850s. How does she know anything about America in the 1930s and gangsters and cars and nightclubs and, crazy female scientists and all this other stuff? It doesn't make any sense. On top of the fact that the conceit is her spirit possesses Ida, our mall or mob mall that Jeff refers to, and causes her to spill the beans on the mobster in a very public setting, which draws a lot of ire and leads to that fateful staircase incident. I don't understand. Are we supposed to believe that Mary Shelley is telling a story about her invading the personality of one of her own characters, or somehow is projecting her essence forward into the future and possessing Ida? Because she sets up one thing and the rest of the movie follows a completely different path. It's a mess.
Well, I would also argue that the film isn't even about the bride. It's about Frank. Frank is the character who gets the plot moving. He's the one who is, the sort of the sweet character that, is looking for love and is sort of a, dare I say, female.
He's looking for intercourse, Jeff.
Well, but no, he rejects it. He rejects sex the first time. Remember, he doesn't want it because he wants it to be more
literally says
mutual.
intercourse.
I know. Well, but I'm just saying, but he says that, but he really wants his love. Anyway, go ahead.
David, go ahead.
Well, I mean, yeah. So 5-10 minutes in, this movie has problems. We're supposed to believe that the spirit of Mary Shelley is inhabiting, possessing Ida. We don't know why she chose Ida, but it's also an alternate timeline, like an alternate Earth, because when you think about it, okay, let me see if I can explain this and get this straight. So here we have an author who says she never really got around to writing the book she wanted to write, or a continuation of the book she wanted to write. And she wanted to tell her bride story. Okay, all right. And so she's going to inhabit this woman. Don't know why, but okay. Yet this woman lives in a universe, an Earth, where everything that happened in Mary Shelley's book, Frankenstein, actually took place.
Mm-hmm. So
it's not fiction. It's almost as if Mary Shelley wrote a true crime novel.
Well, because Dr. Euphronius, or whatever her name is, she recognized the work of Dr. Frankenstein, and was kind of shocked to see his monster kind of, walk in off the street. It's an interesting premise, but it's also one of like 3 premises. It's
not a book. It's something that actually happened in this universe. So how, why, I
mean, they could have gone with that if they wanted to, just cut out the opening with Mary Shelley. But the fact that they felt the need to keep the Mary Shelley thing there to let us know right off the bat that this is going to be sort of this, diatribe, if you will, and this coming from this story of angst and, here's what I really want to do. Like, I was suppressed as an artist or as a woman, et cetera, et cetera. It right off the bat starts it off with a negative, and it seems strident and hard to explain, and it doesn't hold up 10 minutes into the story, to your point about the logic of it. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, like, she had a great success. Maggie Gyllenhaal had that great success a few years back with The Lost Daughter. It got an Oscar nomination for Jessie Buckley, a supporting actress playing the younger version of Olivia Colman, who's the woman who's on holiday, and she befriends Dakota Johnson, and the daughter disappears, and then it's sort of like, how does she react to it? She's a little cool about it. She's not a great fan of children, but it's this very subtle sort of study of motherhood. Like, we think that all women are supposed to relate to the other women, and motherhood's the number one thing, and not always, and then that's sort of a very, I think, bold and sort of unusual take on it. And, it's very sophisticated and sympathetic and everything else. And so that was a success, and it felt like they gave her carte blanche here to do anything she wanted, and she decided she had to be now an artsy filmmaker and do something that was wildly ambitious and, part Guillermo del Toro, part Martin Scorsese, part Jane Campion or something. And I don't know why she went so overtly complicated. And when she misses the basics of screenplay 101 stuff that, I said that Frank is kind of the main character. He's the one who has the arc. He realizes, just as Frankenstein does in Bride of Frankenstein, that this isn't really going to work. It's fraught with all kinds of drama that people aren't going to understand, and my heart is all the more broken. But Ida starts off as a pisser. She's clearly an alcoholic. She's using and abusing drugs. She's mouthing off about everything. And she's the same mouthy person as a monster that she was as a mall. I'm not saying she deserved to be tossed down the stairs. She's ratting on a much worse person, the crime boss, who's hurt women and cuts out their tongues and puts them in jars to, because he doesn't want any woman to speak up, which is, a little heavy-handed. But it's like, if this is called The Bride and it's all about her, where is the arc for her? Other than she's dead and then comes back to life. Doesn't seem much of an arc.
Well, the arc is sort of the arc that should have been for her character in this movie is implied when the movie's just about over, because we meet a detective who's comes into the scene. It's Peter Sarsgaard and his assistant Penelope Cruz, but it turns out she's the real detective. Anyhow,
because they send Secret Girl Fridays out with detectives for cases.
Well,
critic asked me during the movie, is he a private detective? I said he must be, because that's his secretary. And it's like, no, he's a detective who travels with his secretary. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, that it's sort of implied that
she does all the work.
Yeah, she does all the work, but he can't be seen to be relying on her because she's a woman and all this other stuff, which, at the very end, again, spoilers, he is a simpering, crying mess, of course. And he hands over his detective badge to her and says, I quit being a detective and it was conditional. My boss said he would only accept my resignation if I let you be the detective. I'm like, I don't think that's how it works at all. You can't just hand someone a badge and say, yeah, you're a detective now. You also can't. I'm sorry. I missed that. It was it's like Tia Carrere's line in Wayne's World. I learned everything I know from college and the Police Academy movies. But anyhow, and also at the end, when there's a giant scene where a bunch of cops show up and she orders them all to stand down, and the guy on the scene, the chief, is like, who are you to tell me what to do? And she says, I'm a detective. Holds up her badge, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I guess I missed that. Anyhow, back to the Sarsgaard character. About maybe 20 minutes before the movie's over, I feel like that's how much time there is. He's having a conversation explaining the entire deal with Ida. She was working with the cops to try and bring down this mobster from the inside. She was relying on him to provide backup and support at a very crucial moment. I think it was a sting or something. And he didn't show up and he didn't help her. And that, kind of sunk her and ultimately, in a roundabout way, led to her demise. Now, he also slept with her. And he feels really bad about that and how everything transpired. But if that had been established at the beginning of the movie, if you'd taken out all of this afterlife garbage with Mary Shelley, and it would have been a bit conventional, sure, but have her set up her story as going undercover, and then there's this death, and after she's dead and buried in the graveyard, and he comes to visit her, and he's all sad because he feels guilty, and his partner, knows about it, and it's this whole movie, much like Sinners. It just starts off as a 1930s crime drama for the first 15-20 minutes, and then she dies, and then cut to who shows up in the city right then? It's Frankenstein's monster, and he reconnects with the scientists, and the movie goes on from there. You cut out a lot of the nonsense. You can just have it be a Bonnie and Clyde Frankenstein movie, because this movie relies on the visual language of horror, and yet it's not scary. It's a bizarre feminist crime picture. I don't have a problem with it being feminist necessarily, as long as it is not reductive and it's not, bludgeoning you over the hammer.
Me too.
She actually screams out, "Me too." And I think she also says, "I can't breathe," or something. We're just getting all of the social issues on the screen here. What struck me about The Bride of Frankenstein, and I said everything this movie does, almost 100 years ago, is much like this movie, which actively hates men. There is no positive portrayal of a masculine character anywhere in this movie. They are all either potential assaulters, they are liars, traitors, gangsters, or simpering little boys who take advantage of a woman and then turn over their badge to another woman because they feel some sense of guilt. Even the Frankenstein monster, I don't actually think he has an arc. He changes from the beginning of the movie to the end, but it is only change in service of what the movie needs him to be. Because when he first shows up, he's shy, he's very kind of soft-spoken and very much a proper gentleman as much as you can be, as a world-traveling monster. But by the end, he's dancing around and screaming and yelling, and he's become like a British version of Mickey Knox from Natural Born Killers. And then he simpers, just like all the other guys in this movie does.
Natural undead killers.
Love it. And then he's just dead. So, but what I wanted to say, in The Bride of Frankenstein, and I've heard the complaints all week of people have been talking about why this movie was necessary. And now The Bride of Frankenstein is terrible because the Bride of Frankenstein only shows up in the last 3 minutes of the movie. That is not a crime, nor is it a problem if you pay attention to the entire movie leading up to it. That is the point of that film. I've also heard people say, well, the Ida / the bride in this movie has the right to be upset because she didn't consent to being brought back to life. It's the consent argument.
Well, no one did.
Right. In The Bride of Frankenstein, it's either the monster, because he talks a bunch in that movie. I'd forgot about that. Or maybe it's Frankenstein's monster, someone around the situation saying no one asked him if he wanted to be brought back to life. I think he actually says, I'm dead, liked dead, hate life. And that kind of insinuates he was peaceful wherever he was dragged out from. But all of the male characters in that movie, except for the monster, were scheming murderers, kidnappers, grave robbers. They were all awful men, but it was all in their actions. It was cool that they brought people back to life, and there's all those science fiction elements to it. But at the end of it, they're all kind of tragic. And the only one who's really redeemed is Dr. Frankenstein. And who is he saved by? Elizabeth, his new bride, his actual bride, who is a very strong, smart, capable female character who, when Dr. Pistorius, the kind of evil Dr. Frankenstein of The Bride of Frankenstein in terms of storytelling, he shows up at the mansion. I think she leaves, but she's like, you're bad news. I don't want anything to do with you. Stay away from my husband. And then she goes off to do something else. And then at the end, she shows up to the castle after the bride has been brought to life, after Frankenstein, the monster, is freaking out because this bride doesn't want him, and Pistorius and Dr. Henry Frankenstein are fighting. Elizabeth shows up as Frankenstein's monster is about to throw a switch and blow everybody up, and he's like, go. And she's like, Henry, come with me. And they escape, and all the bad guys are killed. And yes, the Bride of Frankenstein, who's only been alive for like 5 minutes of screen time, is blown up. But it is also apparent in the few moments she's had on Earth that she's horrified by her own existence, and she's probably, like the monster, would rather just be in a hole somewhere. So again, The Bride of Frankenstein, people need to see. They should have just re-released. Universal, I understand it's a different studio than WB. They should have just re-released this movie in theaters and put this bride as a DVD extra on a new edition or something.
I know it's 90 years old, Ian, but you just spoiled the whole movie, man.
I've got the banner going, David. I'm also done soapboxing for a bit, so please.
Give it the Guillermo del Toro treatment. Do a version of it that is not trying to be contemporary, but it's doing it as a period piece, and yet whatever benefits you might get from a modern telling of it, I'm not sure there are. I think it's a pretty outstanding film as it is from Frank Whale. James Whale. I'm sorry, James Whale. Why did I say Frank? Oh, because
you're thinking of Frank Whaley, star of Career
Opportunities.
Oh,
there we go. Frank. There's so many degrees of separation of Frank Whaley. Frank, who's the name of the character that Bale is playing. Sorry, James Whale. At least I didn't say Ian McKellen, this shall not pass. But you're right, kind of, but I mean, I think the slight arc, if anybody even has one here, is that I think Frank shows up selfish. He wants this thing. He's, kind of very adamant about it. And by the end, I think, he's self-sacrificing for her for the various reasons. But that's muddled too. I mean, there's so much going on here. We haven't even gotten into the crazy stuff that I don't know what's going through her head when she decides to do a parody of Young Frankenstein with the putting on the Ritz number. That to me was like, I said to Ian when I was telling him about the film, I said, if I was not a critic, I might have walked out at that scene because it's just so irresponsible on so many levels that it really frustrated and kind of irritated me. And I thought, I don't want to invest anymore in this. And that's kind of when I started to wane about the whole thing, because I think after that, she makes bad decision after bad decision after bad decision too.
I've never walked out on a movie, and I wasn't inclined to do so when I was sitting next to Ian watching this last Friday. But, and you know what? I'm probably going to watch a movie that's worse than this year. I definitely will.
That is a gauntlet being thrown down, David.
Oh, totally. This is not the worst movie I've seen this year. And it's audacious. It swings big. Gyllenhaal's throwing everything she can, or everything she can think of, at the screen. She's got her brother, got her husband, got everybody. She's got $90 million. She's going for it. But at no point was I feeling like, all right, I've had enough, because my mentality is usually like, okay, wow, that was a choice, and how much worse can it get, or can this possibly redeem itself? And it couldn't. It didn't. But it's okay. Let's start back like from when we first got trailers for this. I was like, okay, I could go for like a punk rock Sid and Nancy type, Frank and the Bride type thing, and Christian Bale's going to go nuts and go for it. And this looks like something totally different. Let's go for it. I've seen different iterations of, Frank. Heck, back in, it was still within the period, but back in 1985, Sting was playing Dr. Frankenstein and Jennifer Beals was the bride. And that was,
Wasn't that also called The Bride?
Yes.
Called The Bride. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also followed shortly by Frankenhooker.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe this should have had a question.
That video B movie.
Yeah, maybe this movie should have had a question mark instead of an exclamation point. But
it's not a good sign when a movie has an exclamation.
Well, oh, David, we lost your camera.
Okay, here I am.
There you are. Okay, this goes back to something we were kind of talking about earlier today, and we'll get into the crazy stuff in just a bit. But I want to pull over because we're kind of on that jag now. The idea of walkouts, because there have been reports of walkouts on this movie, which is sad because it didn't have much business to begin with.
And they're going to miss the Monster Mash.
No, they're not. Like I told Jeff this when I heard the opening bars of that coming up. I was like, I want to leave. Fortunately, it was the announcement of the end credits. But I'm like, really, they did a Monster Mash and putting on the Ritz. Wow. But okay, here's the thing. We are professional film critics. It is kind of our job to suck it up and watch these movies so that we can write about it, talk about it, warn people, and or invite people to share in our joy, whatever the case may be. But I maintain, and Eric Weber over on Midnight Movie Talk kind of made this point a couple of days ago, sort of this point, that movie theaters are in big trouble. And it is borderline irresponsible for a major studio to put something like this out into the movie theaters at this time, especially with a $90 million price tag, because it's bad for them. I mean, this time last year, Warner Brothers was on the verge of complete financial disaster because they had, unfortunately, Companion, which, was a brilliant movie, one of my favorites of the year, but it also bombed. You had Mickey 17. There were a number of flops that Warner Brothers had before, kind of Minecraft and Sinners, and it started this great streak of hits that they had throughout pretty much the rest of the year.
It did okay.
Huh?
overall as a studio last year, it did
Oh,
okay.
right. But I'm saying this time last year,
Yeah.
the execs were worried that their heads were going to roll.
Mhm.
Now, as far as what I'm talking about, this being irresponsible in terms of movie going experience, movie tickets, it's hard enough, and everybody knows this, to get people to go out to the movie theaters because they have so many options. They've got streaming. Everything has a 21-day window on it now. This is a Warner Brothers movie, so it's feasible. You can just say, I'm going to wait for this to be on HBO Max before the summer. I'm not going to go out for this. So when they do go out to the movie theater and they're sitting there watching this movie, and these are normies, mind you, who expected to see a cool Frankenstein crime movie. It sounds weird, kind of fun, but then to have this bizarre opening thesis statement that doesn't make any sense, to have all this weird messaging and kind of like propagandistic elements thrown at them, I do not blame anybody for deciding, you know what? I've been watching this for an hour. I don't like this. If the movie theater will give me a refund or exchange my ticket, I'm going to go see something else, something I feel maybe is more in my comfort zone. And that was kind of the joke we were talking about this morning, Scream 7. I think Scream 7 is a far superior film, except for that very messy last act. And that is another film that does everything that The Bride claims it wants to do by presenting 2, arguably 3, very strong female characters who are vulnerable, they kick ass, and they fight, monsters. One is wearing a ghost face mask. And it's also, that movie has a better treatment of its male characters, treating them as capable and supportive and not the butts of jokes or things to be made fun of like on a sitcom. So I don't advocate for walking out of movies, but as Chris Rock once said about O.J. Simpson, I understand. So
I'm not saying I would have killed her, but I understand.
Exactly. So let's talk about this dance thing. Well, there's a few dance things in here. There's the bizarre nightclub with the 2026, 2025 era music playing. This is what I call Bridgerton history, which is it's Chicago in the 1930s, but to look at it, you'd never know there's anything such as sexism or racism in human history or American history, because it's a giant bowl of Skittles and everyone's kind of getting along. And it's just very confusing. However,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, also her death isn't necessarily a murder, but more of a mishap, because she doesn't really get pushed down the stairs. She just is. She's got her back up against the stairs and she's kind of cornered and she falls. So,
well, yeah, she's like, they're slapping each other kind of back and forth and she loses her footing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was directed, Ida was directed by Lapino to, Lapino directed his guys to take out Ida.
Ida Lapino. Ida Lapino is.
Ida Lapino, I don't know about you, but Ida Lapino.
But yeah, so
Lupino is played by that guy from James Gunn's Superman, and oh my god!
Oh, was he the president of
that, whatever country,
whatever stand? Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Same bad teeth.
But so the dance scene, I think that Jeff you were referring to was the one with no, the one putting on the Ritz
with Jake Gyllenhaal.
I think that's in the third act. Yeah.
No, that's in the second act.
Is that
okay? Second act. Okay.
Yeah. So they end up they're in New York at this point, right on Broadway, and they're obsessed with this Ronnie Reed character. Frank he's watched all of his movies dozens of times, which means he's constantly going to the cinema. He brings Ida along and they kind of develop this true romance style obsession with movies. It's kind of sweet until, of course, they get into a scene where there's a guy who's actually assaulting his girlfriend in the theater seats in front of him. I'm like, I swear my eyes bruised from hitting the floor and rolling down the aisle. But anyhow, while they're in New York, they come across this cocktail party, which is a reception, I guess, for Ronnie Reed or the studio or something. And Frank, he gets all nervous. He poses as sort of a waiter or something to go up and get close to him. And Ronnie Reed, Jake Gyllenhaal, is talking to a bunch of his friends, and he turns around and Frank just starts kind of fanboying out all over him. And then Ronnie, it's weird because it's in the trailers. There's that scene where Ida has, in that scene, she's got the gun pointed at Jake Gyllenhaal. He's down on his knees, and making it seem like he had done something perhaps untoward toward her, or maybe he's a history of womanizing or something like that. In this case, it's pretty much, you were a jerk to my boyfriend, so now I'm upset at you. But he wasn't even really that much of a jerk.
No, not at all.
He was sitting there talking to colleagues at a private event, and this random weird guy comes up and starts gushing over him. He's like, oh, that's great. I'm glad you're a fan. Thank you so much. And then he turns around and goes back to his business, and this guy's just still in his face again. He's being a creeper, and yet somehow that's his fault.
Another episode of Never Meet Your Heroes.
Right. but I'm saying, it's if they had made him more overtly like, get out of here. What's wrong with your face? You're a freak, get him out of here. That would have been, again, cliched, but understandable. What they have now is like, much with the cop who gets shot coming in to try and rescue the situation, you have an innocent person being harassed and terrorized when they're just trying to mind their business.
I'm glad you brought up his face, because I thought it was really hilarious and also very odd, like so many things in this movie, that anytime somebody saw Frank's face or met him, they were like appalled. And I'm like, wait a minute. You mean to tell me there's nobody in this alternate Earth that is uglier than this Frank? Because he's not that bad looking. I mean, he's scarred. He's sewn together, but he's not like, I mean, he still looks like Christian Bale, and he's not like, he doesn't have the protruding, brow or anything like that. He's not like lumbering. He's not a big, huge.
Oh, he's a hell of a dancer. That's into a 13 going on 30 collective line dance. This is where I question Maggie Gyllenhaal's intelligence in approaching this. What's the point of that scene? To establish that they now have to go on the lam. That's the point of that scene.
Right. That's all it is.
That's it. But now they're going to become these famous people for starting this line dance, and everybody thinks they're the coolest things, the coolest new celebrities. Do you know why Bonnie and Clyde and Dillinger became celebrities? Because they were against the banks and what all the little people were experiencing during the Depressions, and they fought back. And gee whiz, they went along with the killer and bad guys. Yeah, but here it's like, why did they go along with these two and cheer them on? Because these people who were freaking out, Jake Gyllenhaal and these other people, including all the cops a few moments ago, suddenly turned this into a dance number that is 13 going on 30 with Jennifer Garner leading them all to throw it. That's what it looked like. I'm sure that was the influence.
It did.
And they all suddenly go like, oh, she's cool. Let me imitate what they're doing. They're kind of really cool. Or Wicked or whatever the heck, when they do the weird dance between Glinda and Elphaba. And it's just, what is the purpose of these scenes? I keep going back to, and I said this at the beginning of my review, and I said it to you when we talked, but Robert Krajewski, one of our famous instructors from the American Academy of Art, famously gave us advice and said, you can only blend so many colors of paint before you get mud.
Brown.
Exactly, which is a funnier way to say it is mud. And to me, this movie started to become mud. Like, what is the point of this scene? You already have established this one thing, get done with it. But no, she belabors it. Oh, and now we're not only going to have a scene where suddenly they turn into these sort of folk hero celebrities like Dillinger and Bonnie and Clyde, but they're going to do it to Putting on the Ritz, the most famous monster 30s hit of all time. What on God's green earth would drive Maggie Gyllenhaal to say, you know what? I love Young Frankenstein so much. I'm going to invite unfavorable comparisons to that movie by doing my version of Putting on the Ritz. Sorry, Gene Wilder. Are you kidding me? That's insane to me.
She's the only screenwriter on here, and it blows my mind that nobody's like, Maggie, we really going to do this? We really going to do this?
Yep.
It's like, and Christian Bale is not like saying, you want me to actually say Putting on the Ritz? What? You want me to? Okay.
And that's not like that movie's out of favor. That movie's on television every Halloween, and it's a beloved classic, probably one of the top 5 beloved comedies of all time. What is she thinking? Is she so in a bubble? Hey, it'd be really cool if I did a little reference to that great scene with Peter Ball. Do you think people would remember that? Yeah, well, honey, I think they would.
She was on some talk show recently, making the rounds promoting this, and she was talking about the insular process of writing this movie, and basically kind of talking about what you're saying, Jeff, is writing this movie for herself.
Yeah.
And like, and she also made a very informative and unfortunate statement about how she decided to become a director the day Trump got elected the first time. And I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking, yep, this definitely feels like a movie that was greenlit and put into production. I mean, I know we're a year into the second term, but this feels like a movie that was very sure that it would be coming out in a very different political climate than the one to which it was released. And the appetite for this, I think, is just not there. And I think that's reflected in the box office. David, you mentioned when that trailer came out, I suspect that I was in trouble from the get-go. And for me, it was an anti-trailer. I'm going to watch it because, as I established, I'm a film critic and got to talk about it. But there are a couple of big red flags in there for me. One, they showed the scene where they're pulled over by the side of the road and she's up against the car and the cop comes and he starts feeling her up. I'm like, oh, we're really doing this again.
Yeah.
And then there's the scene, which fortunately in the actual film itself, which is one of its only redeeming qualities, they didn't play it the way they have it in the trailer. But the monster says, "The bride of Frankenstein." And then she says, "No, just the bride." I'm like, all right, do you understand what the concept of a bride is? It means that you're married to someone. Back in the 30s, it meant that you were married to a man, and that makes you the bride of Frankenstein. Yeah. Because that's the guy you're married. You know, it's just this ridiculous, not thought through nonsense that's supposed to like stick it to you. And like, it's not sticking at anybody because it doesn't make any sense. And you're an idiot. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I'm just going to say those are great points. And again, I don't want to go back to the mud factor, but she's already got the Annette Bening character, who's a very smart, capable doctor in this. She's kind, she's thoughtful, she's effective, and she's incredibly competent.
Easily persuaded.
Yeah,
easily persuaded. But I mean, I kept thinking, is she going to be a Looney Tune? No, she's not. She's a smart, grounded person. And
she looks a lot wackier than she actually ends up being, which is kind of yeah.
And you've got Penelope Cruz, who's established from this very first get-go that she's smart, that she's the brains of the operation. She looks great. She's cheeky. She's got a sense of humor about it all. She's one of the gals who's one of the guys, that kind of thing. So you've already got two sort of big strikes for, if you really want to go for the sort of the feminist sort of ethos. Great. Why do you have to keep compounding it with all this other stuff when you've got those two things already playing along, percolating along, but every other thing, like to your point about the cop having to cop a feel and stuff like that, that is such a cliche, not from just Crash and dozens of other movies and B thrillers and everything else, but find something else to do with those. Or I don't even know why the cops are the bad guys here, because I suppose of the last 10 years or George Floyd or something, maybe. But I mean, shouldn't the villains be the mob that's after her? That's the real villain. But there's one guy there, but we've got 25 cops running after her because of this one killing in an alley that they can't even be entirely sure of. It just, I don't know what her thinking is when she's sitting down to pen the screenplay, because she keeps making everything into mud because, okay, I've got these two feminist characters, but now everything has to be feminist and every guy has to be bad. And I've got one protagonist or antagonist with the mafiosa, but now every cop is an antagonist. It's too much.
Well, David, to your to something that you were talking about earlier about why would Christian Bale's Frankenstein, I think, is a little bit more than just ugly. I mean, you can tell that he's got some wounds that haven't quite healed, and he took the bolts out of his neck.
It probably smells.
But those left giant scars. What would have been really interesting is if on the road, on their escape, they'd run into, I don't know, maybe some World War I veterans, because this is, in the aftermath of that, like leading up to World War II, you still have people probably going around with like traumatic, wounds and amputations and scarring all over the place. He could have become like the man of those people, because maybe they feel outcast from society because they're not beautiful like Ronnie Reed and all these other people. You could have done so much with this movie, have them go across the country being perceived as criminals because of how they look, because of her criminal background, and she's a woman of ill repute or something like that, but have it be more like the legend of Billie Jean, where there was a misunderstanding that led to this cross-country crime spree, and there's a crooked guy following them using his resources to corrupt and change the story against the heroes of the movie, and along the way, it kind of turns into an A-team situation. They keep running across people that they can help and who help them, and then you really say something with this movie. By the way, Jeff, I have to comment on this before it happens again. You have the best setting for the film at hand because it's storming right now in Chicago.
I know,
you keep getting these huge flashes of lightning behind you.
I was going to say something, but I thought, well, maybe I'll let the other guys sing. But yeah, it's a big rainstorm here.
Yeah,
that's perfect. Yeah, and I like the fact that, you know, we don't have time to develop any of that interesting stuff which you just talked about, but we got time to stop and, you know, get matching tattoos.
And a rather elaborate one that would take a couple of hours to do across the chest. I mean, and like he's already disfigured and he wants to add more to the sort of, which of course nobody had tattoos like that in those days except sailors.
You know, what have made that better is
on their arm.
I don't know if it was the Vacation remake or one of those things, but it's the famous meme of the guy getting the no regrets tattoo across his chest that was misspelled.
I know it was what's his name from the Vacation remake. What's the actor?
Will Poulter?
No, from The Office.
I don't know. Ed Helms.
Yeah, Ed Helms. It was either one of the Hangover movies or that Vacation remake.
Both of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, yeah, I mean, the movie basically, I want to kind of jump to the end because we can honestly stay here all night talking about this film, but I want to be merciful. At the end, they end up getting tailed by one of the mobster henchmen and also the cops.
Yeah.
And Frank gets his head blown off, essentially. Ida gets his body back to Euphronia's lab. And then there's a Tarantino-style climactic standoff where a whole bunch of people burst into the lab. The cops blow away Ida.
Like Bonnie and Clyde.
Very Faye Dunaway.
Like Bonnie and Clyde, except that scene took place outdoors. So you get the idea that they were laying in wait and there's an ambush and there's that iconic scene of the sheriff like breaking through the bushes wearing the giant black shirt. You know, it's the reversal of the thematic good versus bad. In this movie, it's literally like a Keystone Cops clown car of people bursting in, guns ablazing. Because it's not just like a couple of cops start shooting at Ida. You've got more people just running into the room shooting, and then more people running into the room shooting. They would have been killing each other before putting more lead into this lady who was already dead by the time the third wave got in there. Third wave, is that some kind of a metaphor? I don't know. What?
Yeah. So much for police protocol.
Like they were that gun happy in those days. I mean,
yeah, it's Tommy gun happy.
So we've talked a lot about this film and even compared it to the original Bride of Frankenstein. I'd say unfair. Oh, I will say there was one sequence that I thought was really cool. And it was, I don't remember if it was a combined dream sequence or if they were separate, but it was where Ida was kind of floating above the lab, above her body, and she was having a conversation with Mary Shelley's ghost. And it was, I think it might have been that same part of it where they had the head in the jar, which is sort of a callback to the original Frankenstein. I thought that was a really cool scene that belonged in a better movie. The other thing, to folks, if you've never seen the original Bride of Frankenstein, I am going to keep harping on it because it's a masterpiece. I have not watched any making ofs. I haven't read up on it, partially because I want to maintain that wonder. When Dr. Pretorius, who's the mad scientist of that film, brings Henry Frankenstein into his lab to say, hey, look what I've been up to, he brings out these 4 kind of covered cylinders, and I think there's a 5th and a 6th one he brings out later, and inside are miniature people. There's a little king, a little queen, a pope, there's like a mermaid and all this other stuff. But I don't know if it's rear projection. I literally still don't understand how I was watching what I was watching, because in one shot you see the miniature king on his throne and he's like getting out and trying to bang on the glass to get out and see his queen. But you can still see Dr. Pistorius, the actor, moving behind him and fully interacting with him. It doesn't look like it should be possible back in 1935. It looks like it's CG. But that's only one of the many visual marvels that's in that 35 version, and there's nothing in this movie that even comes close to being somewhat interesting beyond the makeup choices, and there's nothing surprising or innovative about it. 35 feels innovative while you're watching it in 26.
You're right.
Yeah, I mean, that dream sequence which you just mentioned is coming somewhat close, or at least it's an
Yeah.
attempt. But the thing is, it's drowned out by so many things that, like I said before, where Gyllenhaal just throws it at the screen.
Yep.
And there's so much being thrown at the screen that it's kind of ridiculous. The bride wants a name, so they come up with, they'll give me an old lady name. They come up with Penelope, which is just wrong because Penelope Cruz is in this movie. Are you saying she has an old lady name or something?
No.
And her name.
That's another thing that, like, of all the names, no.
And her name's Myrna Malloy. Myrna Loy. Another Easter egg. But you know, and then we're just making fun of the Penny name, like Penny. It's like,
I also have to say, if I dare say that, and this is one of my biggest complaints about it, if you're going to do satire like that, if you're going to go for broke with goofy dance numbers and, you know, try to be a music video and use contemporary music and mix all that stuff, like, I suppose she said, well, Baz Luhrmann did it, I can do it, or, you know, other people like that. But it's so ridiculous and so fraught and so crazy. And then they go for the pathos, the sadness. They want me to cry. They want me to feel bad about all this. It's like, really? Amongst all those 100 of other emotions that I'm supposed to be feeling, with you throwing everything but the kitchen sink into the mix? There's a simple story here, a simple sad story. And that's one of the things I will say, just Ian, just to build off of your thing. I'm glad you talked about The Bride, because like I said, that was one of my blind spots. I had never seen The Bride of Frankenstein, and I watched it a couple of days ago myself. And I did not know that was where the story was going, that she was in it that little, but it's very effective. But I will say this, there isn't one image in this whole new movie, and I know it's maybe an unfair standard, to compete with one that we've all seen before. We know what Elsa Lancaster looks like in that robe, that white thing. But when we see her go up the thing and it's very high and she's electrocuted, comes back, and we see the bandages wrapped around her, you can see that very delicate little female figure. And then they do this dissolve. And then she's standing there right in the middle of the screen in that white thing, and her hair is up. It took my breath away. And just the way they present that in the film, even if you've seen it in the poster or you've seen it in all the stills, and it's just like, that is like, here she is, and she is stunning.
Mm-hmm.
She is worth this, like, weight. And she's, oh my God, that's Elsa Lancaster, the woman who's playing Mary. And then she's just like trying to figure out where she is, and she's a little bit herky-jerky and stuff. It's such an effective. She should have gotten the supporting actor nomination for those 10 minutes. And
I don't even. I think it was like 5.
Yeah,
minutes.
5 minutes. But I mean, it's just fantastic. And then I love the fact, this is the pathos of my pathos that I'm pronouncing that word. I know it's a weird word. Sympathy too is Frankenstein realizes, oh my God, I made a mistake. I've hurt this person. This is not the right choice. And it breaks your heart. Those last 5 minutes are so strong.
Well, and I think this is something we talked about at the beginning of the show, and I think it's a huge misstep. I don't know if it was a joke. Based on the rest of the screenplay, I'm inclined to believe it's a misunderstanding. Because when Frankenstein shows up to Dr. Euphornia, whatever at Benning's office, I'm just going to call her that.
Euthanasia.
Euthanasia's office, yes. He says, I'm looking for someone for intercourse. Intercourse didn't mean that back in the 1930s. It meant he wants someone to talk to. He wants a companion. Much like in the original Bride of Frankenstein, I think he went through he's like bride, or no, like friend, companion, wife, or bride, or something like that. He basically just wants someone to share his time with, but he wants someone who also loves him. He's not looking for a sex bot. In this movie, I don't know if Maggie Gyllenhaal knows that word has changed over time, intercourse, because it's all treated as if like, oh, we're gonna build you a mate. I'm like, this isn't weird science, okay? This is based on a very real kind of tragic story. So yeah, this whole thing is a bunch of missteps. I am deadly curious when this thing hits home video in like a week and a half, is there going to be an audio commentary on it from before the movie opens? Much like
I would
Samuel
watch-
L. Jackson on Snakes in a Plane, I will buy that day one and listen to it on repeat because I have to know what she had to say about the making of this movie.
I would totally listen to that. For real. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and it's funny too because you start to ask yourself, okay, is this a riff because she's like doing that punk rock Sid Nancy version of Bonnie and Clyde, if you will, and all bets are off on time periods because even some of the settings here and the production design is almost exaggerative, right? It has that kind of like this is Chicago, but through the lens of like the Batman, right, where it's
Yeah.
enhanced, and that might be because she was associated with that franchise for a bit.
As was Christian Bale, yeah.
Exactly, as was Bale. But then I'm mad, like little things started to really just stick in my craw. Like they did not have 3D movies back in the 30s. And that's that big thing in the thing where she's doing that.
Right,
And
yeah.
and stuff. And just I mean, if you're gonna do period. And be respectful of it and whatever. But I kind of abandoned my interest in it at the putting on the Ritz thing. And I'm not somebody like you can't do that. I mean, the artist used the music from when he's thinking of killing himself. They used the music from Vertigo, and I don't think that was the right choice that the director should have done there. But I don't think that killed the film. It was just, but there's so many of them, and then along comes this choice. It's like, why would you do that when you've got all this supposedly creativity and imagination to do other stuff, and then you lean into that kind of thing? It drove me nuts that made it to the final edit.
I think you get one big decision, maybe two if you're really good, to put in your film that's a huge gaping anachronism that you're going to lean into.
Mm-hmm.
Not 15.
Yeah.
I mean, I go back to, it's 2001. It's hard to believe that it's 25 years ago now, but A Knight's Tale, I think, is one of the best examples. I mean, I think that's a great film. And one of the gimmicks is that it uses modern music on the soundtrack, but also, in period. It starts off with We Will Rock You, but also it's the people in the stadium during the joust, like pounding stakes and things to make the drum beats. Yeah, it's clever, it's fun, it's weird, but it also puts you into the mind like, okay, we're not historically accurate in all ways, but we're also going to play with history and have a little bit of fun with it. But it's not going to be like, oh, what if they had cell phones back in those days? No, we're not going to do that. But yeah, it just made me question everything that I'm watching in The Bride. And at a certain point, if you have a tuned in, turned on, switched on audience and you're messing with that too much, then they're going to stop asking questions and frankly stop paying attention to your movie. I don't know if you heard this, David, but when the lights went up, I think there was 10 people in our theater. I don't even know if any of them were women. It was very interesting. Was there one?
There were some women there.
Okay.
It looked like a double date behind us.
Okay, so probably 2 out of 10. The numbers for this movie were weird because like 53% guys and 47 women for a movie that was like kind of, I think, in terms of messaging, was trying to get at a female audience, but it didn't quite hit that way. But one of the guys said it was different. It was artistic. I liked it. Yeah, that's who you're trying to sell tickets to, Warner Brothers. So yeah. Any final thoughts on The Bride?
Buckley and Bale, they're good here. They are. It's just the material does not. It does them a disservice. And I take the superfluous Mary Shelley stuff out of this movie and set it in 1930s America and commit to it. Am I frozen?
Yes. But your voice isn't frozen.
Okay, great. My voice is just like Mary Shelley. And
now you're in a black void just like Mary Shelley. Okay.
You're back. And then commit to it. But like you said, I mean, you can't do 15 different things. The whole possession of Mary Shelley thing, where she just winds up saying like synonyms of the different synonyms all the time. Plagiarism, cheating, all this stuff is just, she just starts rattling off, and it's so distracting, and it's she becomes an incomprehensible character, and it's unfortunate because I'll watch Buckley in anything. I'll watch Bale in anything. I'm a fan of their work.
Mm-hmm.
But man, this yeah. I mean, again, I don't think it's the worst movie I'll see this year, but geez.
It's also, now that you brought up something very interesting. Two things I want to say, and I'll get to you, Jeff, because I don't want to forget this. But the first thing is about putting on the Ritz. And Jeff, I talked to you about this the other day. There is a way that you can get that reference into this movie and have it work, which is when you go to the establishing shot of the interior of that private cocktail party, because they have a live band playing music there. You have the bars of putting on the Ritz, like maybe the song is finishing as we go into that scene, or it's very subtle, kind of like what they do in Bridgerton, where they take pop songs and do these like period orchestrations of them. So while you're watching the show, you're like, what is that song? I feel like I heard that on the radio last week. And sure enough, it's a top 40 hit, but it's done in kind of like chamber music orchestration. The other thing I wanted to say was, and I completely lost it. So if it comes back to me, I'll mention it. But Jeff, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to end with another quote from our art teacher, Robert Krajewski. And I did my review with it, so might as well use some what I thought was effective there. But Maggie Gyllenhaal in her first film, The Lost Daughter, was working with a very tight sort of context palette, whatever you want to call it. And it was very effective, the acting and the story and the tense and the drama and everything else. Here she's got this big canvas. They gave her all this money and go explore, be Guillermo del Toro, do that, which, by the way, that doesn't help the movie either, coming off of that movie and its success and Oscar nominations for that. But she's painting a lot of different things here, as I said, different colors and broad strokes and all that. But if she wants to be a great artist, she should realize she was better in the first movie. And the key to being, I think, a great artist, whether you're a filmmaker, a sculptor, a singer, whatever, is the proverbial, in quotations here, knowing to put the brush down.
Yes.
And I remember when Krajewski said, like, you've overdone this. It's too complicated. You need to do less. Less is more. And that's the same thing here. It's like, oh man, it's so gonzo. There's so much going on. Oh, that was creative, as that person behind you said. Is it? Or is it just using lots of different kinds of, brushes and colors without necessarily having the discipline to know how to make them into some. I mean, the emperor said to Amadeus there were too many notes. He was wrong, but there's only so many notes, and how you put them together is the art. She's got all these different ideas, and literally half of them should have been tossed out. You have a better story with it's Bonnie and Clyde, except instead of these criminals on the lam, these bank robbers on the lam, you have these societal throwaways on the lam, misfits, and they're just as discriminated against as people who are black or deformed or gay or dwarfs or whatever, all the kinds of things that Todd Browning did in Freaks. There's your sort of metaphor. Do that.
That would have been on the nose, but I think there'd be a way for you to handle that, because I mentioned the thing about like World War I veterans, but you're right, Jeff. What if they encountered this kind of like underground of like the seedy side of America back in the 1930s with all those marginalized groups, and have something unique about what made them outcasts factor into the story, the greater story that's going on? Messagey, heavy, whatever, it would have at least been potentially interesting instead of what we've got. I remembered what I was going to say, and that is with that Mary Shelley portrayal and the possession of Ida, at no point, because I read Frankenstein last year in preparation for Del Toro's movie. And that's one of the reasons I hated Del Toro's movie, is because it's not Frankenstein, no matter what he claims. But that book is intelligent, it's patient, it's beautifully written. I do not believe that this And maybe it's because she's been in hell for 200 years or whatever it is, or wherever she's complaining from in the afterlife. But I don't believe that character is the same Mary Shelley who wrote Frankenstein. There's no way. She's foul-mouthed, she's obnoxious, she's abrasive, she's entitled. None of that comes across on the page in Frankenstein. It's an insightful book about the male psyche from a female perspective, which is just, you read that and you're like, how does she know? Because she's getting it all right there on the page. It's masterful.
Exactly
and then
right.
I watch this ham-handed nonsense. I'm like, you don't know anything about guys, except I know that you don't like us very much.
And she was a cultured, sophisticated, moneyed lady in a way, which made it all the more like, wow, that came out of her. We would have never expected that. It's almost like if Jane Austen had written that.
Yeah. So yeah, again, show me Mary Shelley in, much like the original Bride of Frankenstein. Show me Jessie Buckley as Mary Shelley before she died, and show me that version of the character, and then show me but 200 years inside this warped, tortured prison of the mind or whatever has made her crazy, and now she's gonna possess this 1930. No, forget I said anything, because it's just getting worse. Anyhow, we're gonna leave it there, gang. Thank you very much, David and Jeff, for this rousing conversation. I got more out of this than I did the Bride, frankly. Next week, we're going to do something a little bit different. The Academy Awards are this Sunday, so everyone's going to be watching them and talking about them, how everything's pan out. We're not going to do an official Oscars wrap-up show next week. We're going to do Kicking the Seats, i.e. my best pictures of 2025.
Whoa.
It's very late. It's coming out after the Oscars, but you know what? I haven't done a top 10 list or a best of list since before the pandemic. I promised myself that this was going to be the year, and things have been crazy busy, so I didn't get around to it. So I figured, there's no really big movies coming out this week. Everyone's holding off for Project Hail Mary, which, David, I am reading the book. I took the plunge.
I see it tomorrow.
Well, I am still concerned, but I'm digging the novel. Anyhow, we're going to be back next week talking about the top movies of 2025. It's going to be a bit weird because it's going to be my list. However, whoever decides to join me for that panel, whoever can make it, we'll talk about your picks and how they differ from mine, and maybe we'll get into some scraps over things, or we'll sing Kumbaya and also see how that stacks up to what the Academy thought was the most quality entertainment from 2025. So that'll be next week, date to be determined, but it'll be 8 p.m. Central sometime. I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have David Fowley of Keeping It Real, and Jeff York of The Establishing Shot and Pipeline Artist, and formerly of the American Academy of Art, my fellow art school, which we found out a few months ago that we had the same fundamentals of art teacher, Robert Krajewski, hence the references throughout this evening. So if you like the show, please like, subscribe, and all that business. Ring the bell for notifications. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much and take care. Wait a second. I got to turn this thing off. This isn't like a regular recording. This is a live stream. You'd think I'd have the handle of this after all this time, but no.